Hello and welcome to Worlds Apart. No limbs, no worries. That's the motto of our guest, whose life philosophy has inspired millions of people. But is inspiration alone enough to overcome adversity, especially if economic and social circumstances all seem stacked against you? Well, to discuss that, I'm now joined by author, evangelist, and motivational speaker, Nick Vujicic. Nick, thank you very much for your time and welcome to Moscow. I know it's your first time here.
It's beautiful and I thank you for the opportunity. Спасибо.
Пожалуйста. Now, your main message is a message of hope. You believe that people shouldn't give up regardless of the circumstances. And I think your own life story is a testament to that, especially when it comes to education, because as far as I know, you were the first special needs kid fully integrated into Australia's educational system. You went on to get 2 degrees, but the problem is that most of the children with disabilities around the world, in fact 90%, don't even attend schools. So I wonder if the message that you're trying to spread around is really applicable to everyone else and applicable to people who are born and perhaps raised in much less fortunate circumstances.
Well, first of all, my message is a universal message of hope and faith. To overcome anything is the greatest hope that we can have. And obviously, when you look at the 1980s of Australia, it was a big milestone in the education system and the progress of integration. However, if you rewind 50 years prior, then Australia was not as progressing, if you will. And so I travel all around the world. I speak to governments. I am with presidents and they ask me to speak to their society to not just inspire the people with able bodies, but disabilities as well. And not only just to any corporations, but corporations to encourage them to employ people with different disabilities.
Absolutely, and this is what many people are doing around the world. But one fallout of all this sort of inspirational movement is that it's like a double-edged sword, because what we know from social studies is that, greed and motivation do matter, but what matters even more is your social class, is a country you were born into, your family. And I guess many people can take that as, if Nick is so successful, if he could do that, why am I not so successful? Am I a failure? Am I missing out on something? Do you think that you're setting the expectations for everybody that people can really meet?
My expectation of life is joy beyond circumstances. So it doesn't matter whether you have a job or not. It doesn't matter if you have an education or not. First of all, you have to know the value of you as a person, as an individual. You're irreplaceable. Your value goes beyond the materialistic things or what you can do or cannot do. That's the first thing. The second thing is purpose. And so we all need to reach our full potential. Now, I understand that I was born in Australia and I had a wheelchair. Many people don't have wheelchairs. But now we have a non-profit organization. We've given $750,000 away to people in need, orphanages and hospitals and schools, and helping people. And I've now met 30 people with no arms and no legs to help them go to school and help encourage their countries to embrace them. And not only do we give out wheelchairs, but it's also understanding that the people in the wheelchairs need also courage to go out and try new things as well. It's not just making excuses as well of, what's not there and what is there. What can we do? So my message really is universal for everyone, especially able-bodied people where we have disabilities of the heart. We have disabilities of fear, and we need courage to overcome all adversity and love one another. And as a nation, it takes time. It takes time for society to change and develop. But really, it begins and ends with hope and believing in oneself.
How significant do you think this appearance factor, this element of curiosity or captivation in what you're trying to do? Are people turning to you because they see that you look differently?
Especially when you get up in front of the youth and it's very difficult to get their attention. I remember when I was at school, a speaker came on stage and you wonder, well, what is he going to say? What is he going to tell me that I don't know? Because as a teenager, you believe you already know everything. Yet you see a man without arms and legs smiling and it gets your curiosity. And so I don't believe that it's necessarily just how I look different. If it's just the fact that famous speakers are drawn because of how they look, then there are many speakers then who are not famous, but they are. And so it's not about how they look, it's their message. And that's what I think, content and how you present things. And I'm not anyone as far as a better person than anyone. I'm just like anyone else. It's not about Nick Vujicic and his strength. It's about a message of hope that everyone can receive and apply in their life, no matter what socioeconomic status they're in or disabilities they have.
Well, speaking about this message of hope, the typical disability is far less, I don't want to say glamorous, but I think it attracts far less attention. If you look at the WHO figures, around 15% of people around the world, that's around 1 billion people, are living with some sort of disability. And yet, changing societies is very difficult, especially in developing countries. Those people, they face a lot of economic and social pressures. Why do you think people around the world flock to events, to your speeches, and yet are less accommodating when it comes to making the world a better place for people who are struggling with some disability?
I think everyone wants to make the world a better place. I haven't met anyone who doesn't want to make sure that in their lifetime they try and do what they can do to feed
Do they
them.
actually do anything? I mean, it's easier to love the humanity than a person who is living next door to you. I mean, that's the saying.
Do you sponsor a kid?
I don't sponsor.
Have you visited a hospital?
Yeah.
So good. So that's good. So that's for you. So what I'm trying to do is basically, as we go around the world, we want to inspire change, but put love into action. And so change that you want to see in the nation, it starts with you, it starts with me, it starts with everyone. But everything starts with the vision. It starts with the dream. And sometimes it needs to be communicated that it's okay to dream a big dream. Honestly, I've been to countries where they actually kill children with disabilities. They bury them alive because of cultural beliefs. So I've seen the extremes of disability integration and acceptance. And I really do believe for change. And we've seen fruit in the last 10 years of me traveling 55 countries around the world. And so that's why I continue to do what we do, because we have seen change and attraction of wanting to see a change.
But do you think that it is perhaps more difficult to have a more severe disability than, let's say, something that is less debilitating? Because people cannot afford to treat you badly. I think that would be socially unacceptable, but they can afford to discriminate against somebody who is perhaps too obese or has, let's say, a crooked nose or whatever. I mean, on some level, it is much easier to hurt somebody who is just a little bit different from you than somebody like, for example, yourself, especially with the celebrity factor that comes with it.
Yeah, I see exactly what you're saying as far as, I would title that as bullying. As teasing, as gossip. In fact, that's what we're doing in America. I'm speaking to 300 schools at a time, live internet, to stop the epidemic of bullying. Actually, there are about 4,000 teenagers who who actually commit suicide every single year in the States. And actually, 40% of the reason why teenagers are committing suicide in America is because of bullying at school. So we're talking 2 teenagers a day because of the nose, because of the hair, because of this, because of that. And actually, it's unacceptable. And so that's where I really want everyone to understand, again, not just the value of themselves, but the fruit of their actions and the words, that we should love each other, not divide, not judge, not gossip, because we don't know who's going through something very, very difficult at home. Maybe they're being sexually abused and you just have nothing else to do but to tease them because you're cool. No, it's not cool. And so that's the message and values that we're bringing into the education system around the world, to say that's not okay. Just because it's been culturally acceptable until now, it doesn't mean it should continue.
Now, psychologists have long established that people have this need to compare themselves to others. And when you see somebody who is perhaps in a less fortunate circumstances than yourself, that does bring some relief, whether we like it or not. I wonder if you have ever experienced that yourself, looking at somebody else and thinking, well, at least I'm not like him or her.
No, I never liked that person. What I've realized in my life is that every single human being has value. And there is a thing in the human spirit that I find my faith in God, in understanding that I need to be compassionate upon every single person. You know, there were many people who judged me for how I looked at school. And you might think it was mean that people teased me, but they did tease me. And it brought me to an attempted suicide as well at age 10. And what I realized was even the people who were teasing me, they all had different differences, and I could actually tease them about how they look. But I didn't want to do that because it doesn't solve anything. They're still a human soul, and they're still on their search for their purpose and their life and the choices that they make. And so if someone doesn't want to be my friend because of how I look, that's their problem. That's their issue. They missed out on a good friend.
Well, I'm sure many people would like to be your friends now, at least. Not only because of your, again, celebrity status, but because you seem to be very approachable and a very kind person. But I think such attitude towards life is only possible when you yourself are not hurting inside. How did you manage to overcome something like that?
And so when I realized that the enemy is not out there, but me, I'm my worst enemy because I let the lies grow in my mind. Oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not going to ever get a job. I'm never going to get married. I can't even hold my wife's hand. I'm not going to be able to hold my kids when they're crying. See, my, if you will, happiness right now, it started with a dream in believing that it was out there to look for and search for. And so now today I'm happy, I'm a speaker, I'm married, I love that, love my life. But it was a journey, definitely a journey. At age 13, I hurt my little foot playing soccer. I love soccer. I'm looking forward to the World Cup in Russia in 2018. And what I realized that I had a choice, either to be angry for what I don't have or be thankful for what I do have. And then finally at age 15, I started my faith journey in understanding that God does have a plan for me. Maybe I don't know what that plan is, but I need to give that plan a chance. I need to give God a chance with my broken pieces.
As I heard you saying, if you can't see a miracle in your own life, perhaps you can be a miracle for somebody else. Nick, let's take a very short break, but when we come back, staying strong for yourself is challenging enough, but what about being there for others? That's coming up in a second on Worlds Apart. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Worlds Apart, where we are discussing abilities and disabilities with Nick Vujicic. Nick, I've seen many of your interviews, and most of them leave you feeling good and strong, but there was one interview that really broke my heart, and I'm talking about the one where you discuss your family and when you actually say that your mother didn't get flowers when you were born. And that's, as a young mother, I find this extremely, extremely sad. We talked, and you talked about overcoming your personal adversity, but what about others? Isn't it even harder on the caretakers to accept the reality and to accept perhaps a different vision, different future for their loved ones?
Definitely in a country that doesn't have as many opportunities as others, you definitely look ahead and think, well, what are the opportunities ahead for my son or daughter? My parents were told that I would never walk. And then when they saw me walking, they said, well, we don't know what he can achieve until he tries. And so we just tried, and it was very, very much of a big obstacle to have not one special needs kid in a mainstream school, yet my mum wanted that to happen. And so there were many battles that they had. I would have to say in your question that I think everyone looks at different angles of a situation, and I think they're all equally difficult. I really do. I don't compare each other's suffering, though as an 8-year-old I felt like my whole world was crumbling. From my mum's side of the world, everything was crumbling. From, all these, it was terrible, it was tragedy. Mm-hmm. But what the beautiful thing about inspiration and hope, real hope, is that it can overcome all things. And you'll see a lot of inspirational speakers out there who have sometimes even behind the scenes motives and difficult to know why they're doing what they're doing. But you can tell if a message is true, if you can see the speaker is authentic. And hope is the most important thing. And if there's anything I can communicate to anyone is never give up and dream big, because you don't know your limits yet.
Well, here in Russia we have this saying, hope dies last. And as somebody who's been to many war zones, I can really attest to that. And to me, that's not an inspirational phrase. That's actually a very, very sad phrase, because people do hold on to hope until everybody around them is killed. But sometimes I think you really need to be very, very careful about where your inspirations or somebody else's inspirations may lead you and people around you.
And so the only way that I can really talk about hope is in my personal way. And so when I have a hope that actually conquers death itself, I can actually say that hope never dies. And that's the only way. I have joy and peace, and I have strength no matter what. To have a limitless life, it needs to also conquer death. So believing in heaven and believing that, you know, some of these young kids with no arms and no legs are now going to believe that God has a plan and that heaven is real, and they're going to come up to me and hug me with their new arms in heaven. I've seen hope. I've seen power. I've actually seen miracles. I've seen blind people seeing, deaf people hearing, lame people walking. I've actually seen miracles. I have a pair of shoes in my closet just in case God gives me arms and legs miraculously. So I have a hope that's real, a hope that never dies. And that is when you bring in that faith. And so I can only talk about hope then in my own personal way, but you're absolutely correct.
You talked in your books about how supportive and loving your family was, but it's not always the case. And here in Russia and in many other countries around the world, including Western countries, it's a well-known phenomenon that husbands and fathers leave their families within the first year of their child being diagnosed with a life-threatening disease. And again, you talked about not giving up on yourself, but how would you try to persuade others of, not giving up on somebody who is dependent on them?
It's a really good question. All over the Western society as well, 80% of the marriages that are affected with disabilities end up in divorce in the first year as well. And so this is not a new thing to me. It's very sad. My mum and dad, they had their struggles, definitely. They had, though, 5 years together, and that's what really kept them together. With their faith, though, is the biggest thing. To believe that you're not a mistake. Sometimes it's difficult to believe that when your own father or your own mother walk away. But first of all, God is a father to the fatherless. He has not left you. He loves you. And then go see how you can also be a light or happiness or joy to someone else. And that sounds ridiculous, but it's not. I've met many people who feel like they have no purpose, but now they go to the hospitals, for one example, with the kids who have cancer and they haven't smiled or laughed for a very, very long time. And they go there and they dress up funny and they bring music and they make them laugh and they help them forget about the pain for that day and relieves the parents as well.
It's not only spiritual. I think there are many studies that indeed suggest that volunteering and helping others is the best way of helping yourself.
The best medicine of the heart. That's definitely, yeah.
I think in the situations that we are talking about, what matters is not only your disposition, your character, but also the social circumstances around you. And cultural attitudes towards disability are very different in different countries. Do you think you would have become the same kind of person if you were raised in your parents' native Serbia as opposed to Australia?
Good question. I don't know. There are many factors. Even if I was born in the same country, to the same parents, even just 10 years earlier, how different would it be? I don't know. Would it have been more difficult? Yeah, probably. Is my mission as a superhero to save the world? No, that's not who I am. But if in any way, if I can help others become who they can be and believe in themselves and their own potential, then it's only a net plus. It's definitely something that we really want to make a difference and a change. We have only 6 million followers on Facebook, on social media. We want to have 400 million teenagers giving $1 a day to end world hunger. There are 10 million slaves in the world, sex slaves. I've met sex slaves and all kinds of slavery in the world, human trafficking. And so we really want to make a difference, not just with the message, but with love. And that will take time to build that army. But I really believe that this world, as bad as it is getting, and the worse that it is getting, there is an opportunity for this next generation to really learn the most and come together like never before and make a positive change.
I know that your biggest audience to date was in India, I think around 110,000 people.
That's correct.
And this is a country with a very peculiar attitude to disability, because on the one hand, the handicapped people there are treated almost like holy people. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, they have this whole industry, beggars industry, that exploits the handicapped, and that sometimes leads to children being intentionally maimed to create that economic opportunity for their families. And at the end of the day, that business model, which is very, very cruel, it is based on empathy. So you always have the combination of the good and bad in any life phenomenon. Don't you think that disability tends to bring out both the very best and the very worst in people.
You have a lot of fear and pride and greed in the world, okay? And India is not the only one. I've seen it everywhere. Unfortunately, very, very sad stories all around the world. As far as disabilities bringing out the worst in things, I don't think you have to have a disability for me to see the worst of you. We all have something and different triggers to bring the worst out in anyone, in me, in you, in everyone. And so it's the fear of the heart, it's disabilities of the heart that could bring out the worst. There are people who do exploit different people, but not even disabled people. Everyone exploits everyone. Unfortunately, the human nature is such that exploitation is there. And that's a big thing to understand, that who you are and how you live your life is more important than what you achieve and what money you have.
Absolutely, but I think society also influences that in a very profound way. And you know, before interviewing you, I had a chat with my friend who has a special needs kid, and she is very bitter about, you know, people giving her son what she calls pitying look. You know, she believes that he's fine. He still believes that he's fine, but they're getting this, you know, sorrow and pity from society. Yeah. And what I would like to ask you is, what you find more debilitating, self-pity when you cannot come to grips with who you are, or society giving those, you know, pitying looks to you?
I think it's self-pity, and so I had that as well. And actually, when I did not have self-pity, and then I had the society looking at me in pity, I smiled. And I learned how to put a brave face on and say, hello, how are you? Nice to meet you. And then they realize, oh, wow, he's just like me. He just has no arms and legs. And so I think this is an effort that the government can do through media, through more inspirational stories as well as types of media and newspapers and all that, but also in the education system. Understanding diversity, that everyone still has value, and integrating everyone. I think it takes some time for society to catch up at times, but if I had to choose what's more debilitating, it would be self-pity. But when you can get out of that and you smile and you know you're okay, you really actually start having compassion for other people who are limited in their thinking.
Mm-hmm. Well, you certainly managed to get out of that, and you actually seem like a person who has everything one can dream of. You have a very fulfilling career, you have a beautiful family, you're a dad. Congratulations on the new developments in your family. Is there still anything that you really, really want but understand that you cannot have? And if so, how do you deal with this very unsettling realization that there are certain things in life that are off limit to you? They may be available to others, but they're not meant for you personally. How do you deal with that?
You might be surprised with my answer, but basically there is nothing on this earth that I, first of all, feel like I need to experience or have. I don't care. I'm content. My treasure is not here. My treasure is in my faith and my family. The biggest thing that I have that I want more of is quality time with my family. So as I travel around the world and I have 35,000 invitations for me to speak and I receive 100 every single week, it's difficult to not be there. And so last year my wife traveled with me 65% of the time, and now she's pregnant with a second boy, and so she can't come with me, with our 2-year-old as well. And so, but how do I overcome that? With planning. Really, basically, we have a next 3-year plan to transition me, and we hope to have some new developments. Some I can talk about, some I cannot talk about. Some developments that basically will enable me to share my story and an ongoing inspiration from TV, and basically not having to travel as much.
Well, Nick, I really appreciate this time spent away from your family. I hope that some of our viewers were touched by your warmth and inspiration. So and to our viewers, please share your thoughts and inspirations on our Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube pages. And I hope to see you again, same place, same time, here on Worlds Apart.